Aurora Peters heard the alarm go off, but it wasn't the sound of her alarm. She couldn't remember the last time she turned on hers. She woke up and looked beside her. "Not again," she muttered. She had spent the night on another man's bed again, something that seemed to have become a habit. Aurora got up shamefully and got dressed. She could hear the young man on the bed shower praises on her for her sexual prowess, but none of it mattered. Aurora only worried about getting home without being seen by a third eye. Something was wrong with her, and she knew it. Her uncontrollable drive for sex has spiked in recent months. First, it started with a daily desire to be with a man. She fought hard to not end up with any man that isn't her partner, but that was a fight she lost sooner than had imagined. Aurora went about her close-knit community looking for single men with which to satisfy her desires. As long as they were single, she was fine with it, but it was only a matter of time. She could no longer wait to find herself a single man to quench her desire. Aurora ended up with anyone with a third leg, married or single. It felt like she was under a curse she has become a sex addict. The regrets that used to accompany her acts soon gave way, and it was all fun for Aurora. She set out daily on a quest to find a man that could satisfy her. Men came in their numbers to try their luck with her. The more men she met, the more she was disappointed, and the more she craved for sexual satisfaction. Her quest to find a man in the community that can match her energy proved abortive. She decided to take the quest outside of town. Aurora relocated to a new community, far away from her previous one. Perhaps she would find someone that would give her what she was looking for. The new girl in town was hot and inviting, with a high sex appeal to the men in town. It wasn't long before she found herself increasing her body counts, but still not getting the satisfaction she craved. She was becoming frustrated. The men in the new community looked promising, with athletic bodies and so much talks about their ability to ace her bed game. Sadly, they were all empty words and wasted muscles to Aurora. One night, while Aurora sat down in the local pub looking for the next man to play with, she found herself talking to a charming young man, Jeff. Aurora wasn't used to lengthy conversations, but something about Jeff made her give him more of her ears before offering her body. She liked the way he was soft-spoken and didn't mention anything about his ability to match her high libido. The more she listened to Jeff, the more she grew a likeness for him.
"You sound like the kind of guy I would want to settle down with, but it takes more than words to keep me,"
Aurora said. Jeff knew exactly what she meant, but didn't want to sexualize her.
"I know what you want, and I also know what you need,"
Jeff replied. Aurora leaned forward on her chair and smiled at him. Her eyes were lustful, but her ears were also itchy to hear what the young man had to say. Jeff has made a living out of reading people. He was a therapist, and a good one at that. He managed to get Aurora to listen a bit longer. The hard part was to get her to share her experience with him. Aurora made him a promise to share with him everything he wanted to know, but only after she had gone to bed with him. Although Jeff didn't like the condition, he was willing to learn more about his new companion, so he took on her offer. At the end of the night, Aurora was satisfied for the first time in years. Finally, she has found the one person she's been looking for. There was only one question on her mind. Will Jeff still want her after hearing her story?
"I know your kind of lady. You might have been with multiple men for the satisfaction you've just gotten. I can understand that. I just want you to know that I don't judge you. I only want to hear your story,"
Jeff said, reassuringly. Finally, she has found herself a man who is judgmental, who listens and still brings her the satisfaction she wanted.
"I wasn't always like this,"
Aurora started. The young therapist listened with rapt attention as his new mistress narrated her story. Aurora's story started when she went on a girls' trip and met Stanovich, a Polish marketer, who swept her off her feet and made her fall in love. They both started a beautiful relationship. The wines, the trips, the mental stimulation, and the gifts made her fall deeper in love with Stan. It was like a fairy tale love story to her. Stan had everything Aurora wanted, but she lacked the one thing he needed. He often complained that she couldn't satisfy him in bed. Even though Aurora knew Stan could leave her any time, she was determined to give him whatever he wanted. She started looking for ways to make her new lover happy. From watching videos to getting therapies, none of them moved her to the level of Stan's energy. Stan started cheating on her. with the excuse that she wasn't satisfying him. She would protest his infidelity. Stan would apologize, only to repeat it again. Her friends advised her to walk out of the relationship, but Aurora only wanted to make Stan happy. They both loved each other and wanted things to work. Stan suggested several ways to help Aurora get up to speed with him, but her body always failed her. While Aurora sat down contemplating how to deal with her relationship with Stan, a friend suggested using stimulants. It was something she never liked, but she was desperate at that point and was willing to do anything to keep her boyfriend away from other girls. Aurora resorted to taking sex enhancement pills. It didn't take long after she started with the pills for Stan to finally give her the thumbs up she's been hoping for. Her new prowess spiced up their relationship and made Stan more faithful than he was. There were no more late nights with other girls, no hanging out in the pubs, and no more threats of leaving her. It was a win-win for both parties. However, things took a different turn when Stan had to travel for a gig outside of town. Aurora was alone for a month. She soon realized how much damage the pills have done to her. She could no longer stay a day with sex, and so she started sleeping around while Stan was at work. The news got to Stan, and he ended the relationship and never came back to the city. Stan found himself another girl and moved on with her, leaving Aurora completely shattered and heartbroken. Sadly, her heart wasn't the only thing that was broken. The pills have taken root in her body. She found herself with an increasing urge to have sex. She tried to control herself, but her hormones were stronger than her willpower to abstain. Aurora started looking for different men to satisfy her. She has become a nymphomaniac, a sex addict. All she wanted was to please her partner. She never knew she would end up destroying herself.
I did everything possible to break free from the addiction, but nothing worked, so I just fed my desires.
Aurora explained. Jeff took her hand and smiled at her. He promised to help her deal with the addiction. Aurora was pleased to know that someone was willing to help her. Although she already came to terms with her addiction, she still wanted help deep down within her. They scheduled regular therapy sessions, which Aurora didn't fail to honor. One session followed the other, and Jeff realized that she was no longer just his patient. He was already in love with her. They say don't fall in love with your patient, but Jeff couldn't help it. The only thing stopping him from confessing his love to her was her addiction. He feared she may not be loyal to their relationship. 2 months into the therapy, both parties could no longer hide their feelings for each other. Aurora knew that for their relationship to work, the therapy must produce a positive result. Jeff didn't have to tell her. She saw it in the way he hesitated to surrender to his feelings for her. They took things slowly for a while before it got heated and their relationship blossomed. After months of daily sessions, Aurora was finally able to go days without sex. Jeff was no longer worried about leaving her alone at home while he went about his job. The town was a small one, and an escapade would spread like wildfire. None of them wanted that. After a year together, Jeff asked the big question, and Aurora said yes. They both got married after 2 months. Jeff was a happy man. His mum always asked him to get married, and now he finally did. But Aurora was the lucky one. She had a husband who was a therapist and at the same time could match her sex drive. Barely a year together, while Jeff and Aurora slept in their small apartment, they heard a loud protest on their property. The couple wondered what was going on. Jeff opened the window and found only women and young girls protesting. On the placard they were carrying were boldly written inscriptions accusing Aurora of sleeping with their husbands. Jeff was vexed. He stormed out of the house to confront the small gathering of protesters for accusing his wife wrongly. There, they all narrated how they saw Aurora with their husbands while Jeff was at work. His jaw dropped. He went back to the house and confronted Aurora, and she confided in him that his therapies didn't work, and she had to play along as she didn't want to lose him. Jeff's fear came to pass. While he was away at work, Aurora would sneak in a man to satisfy herself with. Sometimes she would meet them in their houses. There were gossips around town, but Jeff felt they were because of her past. He was always defending her anytime anyone raised a concern. This time, he was done for. Tears ran down Jeff's cheeks as he questioned his decision to marry her. He was played. He took a risk and was paying for it. He should never have let himself get married to a lady with such past. Trusting Aurora to truly change was his mistake. But as a therapist, he had to believe that he was good enough to change even the worst person in the society. Jeff's mind flashed back to how many times she demanded for sex any time they were together. He should have known that she hasn't changed. His ego led him on. The truth was right there in front of him, but he ignored it all along. That night was the last time they saw Jeff. He took a hike to his office and slit his wrist. They found him dead in the pool of his blood. Everyone blamed Aurora for the death of one of the stars in the town. Aurora couldn't take the heat from the stigmatization. They could have imprisoned her if they could. They tried to imprison her on the grounds of emotional abuse, but everyone in town knew her only crime was an addiction Jeff knew about. They say time heals all wounds, but there are some wounds that will never heal. Aurora truly loved Jeff, and she wished things had worked out between them and not end up the way it did. She thought about leaving the town to start afresh in a new community, but that would mean feeding her addiction more. Staying back in the town helped her put her addiction to check, as it was no longer as easy as it used to be to find someone to sleep with any time she wanted to. Although she still found men willing to take her to bed, they were only a scant of them. She had no new person to experiment her desires with. Aurora already knew how each of the men willing to bed her would perform. Life in the community was becoming boring, but it provided a way for her to honor Jeff's effort. Perhaps if she stayed a little longer, she would be free of her addiction. She locked herself indoors for hours to avoid contact with any man. However, when the addiction comes biting hard, she would give in and leave the house to feed her addiction. On a cool Friday evening, Aurora strut down the street of her small country home. She has walked these paths a million times and was used to the stares and unspoken disdains. But something was different this time. Her shoulders began to drop as she heard voices calling her unprintable names from different corners of the street. The names were coming from familiar lips. She bowed her head and wished the ground beneath her would open and swallow her. But wishes don't make reality. She managed to drag her low-spirited body into her apartment and shut the door behind her. Perhaps it would drown the voices that were swelling in the air against her from outside. The seemingly soundproofed apartment only managed to keep more words from coming in, but couldn't keep the ones in her head from tearing her apart. She didn't used to care what they say about her before, but now it was getting to her. Aurora spent the rest of the day drowning in thoughts. If only they knew her story and how she became this person they so resented. She used to be a sweet soul, someone everyone loved, but now she can't go back to the community she grew up. She has made a mess of every good that was known about her. It became clear to Aurora that the community was no longer safe for her. The men that always desired her on their beds never answered any question for their infidelity, not from the authorities and not from their partners. Everyone pointed at her as the problem in the community. She must remove herself before they rid the world permanently of her. Aurora had no choice but to move away from the town. It was for her own good and for the good of the community. She carried with her the guilt of Jeff's death, but also the addiction that has defiled any solution. In her new town, she tried to hide her acts under the cover of the night. Aurora spent most part of the day looking for a solution to her addiction, while she fed the same addiction in the cover of the night. One day, she ran into a doctor, Dr. Lucas, who promised to help her. She jumped willfully at his offer and was ready to pay any amount for a solution. All Aurora wanted was to be a normal girl again and live a normal life. Dr. Lucas put Aurora on hormone suppressants. At first, Aurora rejected the idea because she already tried it, and it didn't work. However, she obliged when the doctor told her that the medication was different from the regular hormone suppressant out there. The treatment continued for a month, and Aurora started noticing some changes in her libido. Excitedly, she appreciated Dr. Lucas for his breakthrough with her.
You must continue the treatment for the result to be permanent.
Of course, Aurora had no problem with it. She wanted nothing more than to lead a normal life again. Aurora became sober for weeks for the first time. The results she was getting made her continue the treatment. She was no longer aroused by the sight of a man, something she was proud of. Aurora started living a normal life like every other girl in town. She went from days without sex to weeks and then months. After 8 months of abstinence, Aurora met a handsome guy and was ready to have a normal sex with him. She soon realized that her sexual urge was completely gone. That night was a disaster for her. She didn't feel a thing, even though she could see how good the young man was. Something wasn't right. Aurora ran back to Dr. Lucas and shared with him her experience.
It worked. That's great.
Aurora was surprised at his response. What did he mean by it worked?
Did you just use me for an experiment?
Asked curiously.
Yes and no.
He explained.
Yes, because that has not been tested on someone with such an abnormal libido like you. No, because I had hoped it would result to that.
Aurora was taken aback. Why would he hope for such an outcome? She has moved from one extreme to the other. Furiously, Aurora demanded to know why he treated her the way he did. Dr. Lucas, with a big grin on his face, explained his reasons to her.
Your addiction led to the death of my brother, Jeff. I looked for you when I heard the news of his death. I was hoping his death would compel you to change, but you just can't stop yourself.
Aurora was devastated by Dr. Lucas's reasons. As much as she wanted to press charges against him, she understood why he did what he did. The doctor warned against taking other enhancements to get her libido back. He said, it will only move her from one extreme to the other. There was no normal for Aurora. It was all gone. For the 3rd time, Aurora moved town, never to be seen again. All that was left of her were the stories people told of a lady with an abnormal sex drive. If you enjoyed this story, please support us by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. Thank you for watching and see you in our next story.